Hey guys, Ryan Martian here, and today I wanted to discuss the way foreshadowing, when done correctly and in a tasteful way, rewards an audience and as a result, keeps them interested and invested in what is going to happen next. I recently made a video comparing the different ways Better Call Saul and The Walking Dead handled cliffhangers in their respective season finales, and this is going to be a similar video, albeit one without comparison. I'm going to focus solely on the second season of Breaking Bad and how the showrunners successfully accomplished a few different uses of foreshadowing throughout the length of the season without insulting the intelligence and patience of their audience. The three specific uses I'll be discussing are visual foreshadowing shown at the very beginning of an episode, which was resolved within that same episode. Foreshadowing that occurred in the middle of an episode that seemed trivial at the time and wasn't implicitly obvious, but paid off in an extremely rewarding way. Finally, a use of foreshadowing that spanned several episodes throughout the entire season, including the season finale. As always, there are major spoilers ahead, but I always want to give you guys a fair warning. You have been warned. The first example of foreshadowing I mentioned above was implemented in 2 episodes, specifically episodes 2 and 5. This was a perfect amount of times to use it, because even one more use might have been overkill and would have lost its luster. The showrunners were also smart enough to space them out instead of using it in back-to-back episodes. Episode 2 begins with several static and panning shots of what appears to be the desert. At first, we see fragments of metal and bullet casings. We also hear what sounds like some sort of machine working in the distance. As the scene progresses, and we come closer to its source, the sound becomes louder and louder. We next see a shadow bouncing up and down, and a few moments later, find out that it's a car. We see more bullet casings along with broken glass and plastic. Something very bad has obviously occurred, and we are apparently witnessing the aftermath. After a few more establishing shots, it becomes clear, when the license plate is revealed, that the bouncing car is Jesse's. Bullet holes cover the outside of the car and glass is flying everywhere. The last we saw Walt and Jesse, they were being kidnapped by Tuco and driving away from Walt's house at the end of episode 1. The following question is posed to the audience. What the hell happened in between then and now? We soon find out they were taken to Tuco's uncle's house near the Mexican border. Tuco wants them to come to Mexico and cook for him there and never return home. Luckily for Walt and Jesse, Hank found out that Jesse has a LoJack installed in his car, and he starts to follow its trail. After some deception and the near death of Jesse, Tuco is critically wounded by Jesse and pushed into a ditch left to die. However, he manages to crawl out and stumble over towards Jesse's car. We next see a car driving towards the shack in the distance, and it's Hank following the LoJack signal. When he pulls up behind Jesse's car, he sees someone next to the driver's side door. Mistaking that person for Jesse, he is horrified when it turns out to be Tuco. After a few tense moments, Tuco reaches inside the car for his rifle and accidentally turns on the car's hydraulics. After an intense gunfight, with Jesse's car being pummeled by bullets, Hank manages to shoot Tuco in the head and kill him. Successful visual foreshadowing completed within 1 episode. Episode 5 begins with 2 people crossing a river. It soon becomes clear it is Mexican immigrants attempting to enter the United States illegally. After they cross the river, one of them notices something glimmering in the mud. He picks it up, and it's a dental grill encased in a lucite cube. It's a rather curious thing to find in such a random place. As a result, the audience is posed with the following questions. Whose grill was it? What is its significance? And how did it get to this specific spot? About midway through the episode, we receive the answers to the first 2 questions. It's Tuco's grill, and it was given to Hank as a gift from his fellow officers for taking down the notorious drug boss and for his recent promotion. We also find out that Hank is experiencing a bit of PTSD from the event. He nearly passes out from a panic attack after exiting an elevator and starts calling out of work to do some home brewing in his garage. He fears for his life as he believes the cartel will soon retaliate. Near the end of the episode, while him and Maria are asleep, they are woken by what is assumed to be gunshots. Hank believes the cartel has found him and they are exacting their revenge. After some quick sleuthing, it turns out the gunshots are coming from the garage. It's Hank's homebrewed bottles of beer exploding. The next day, we see Hank drive to the edge of a river. He gets out, takes a deep breath, and throws Tuco's grill into the middle of it. Once again, visual foreshadowing completed within 1 episode. The second example of foreshadowing occurs in the middle of episode 12. We see Marie and Walt tucking Holly into her crib. Walt places a clean towel and a blanket to her side in case she does a little spit up. This appears to be a completely innocuous and inconsequential scene, simply showing a little trick Walt learned when Walt Jr. was an infant. However, every scene in Breaking Bad has a very specific purpose, and we will soon find out why. Later in the episode, after Jesse injects heroin, he lies down on his back. Jane warns him, "Not on your back, baby, in case you throw up," and pushes him onto his side along with placing a pillow to prop him up. The word baby and the phrases not on your back and in case you throw up were no accident. The prior scene with Walt tugging and Holly is now directly connected with this one. Finally, after Walt receives some advice from what is to him a random stranger about raising a girl, he goes back to check on Jesse because he is genuinely concerned about him injecting all his money into his arms. Both Jesse and Jane are passed out from the recent heroin hit, and Walt shakes Jesse in a failed attempt to wake him up. As he does this, Jane slips off Jesse and winds up on her back. A few moments later, Jane starts to throw up and chokes to death as Walt watches on in horror. Although inside, he is happy that Jane is now gone from Jesse's life. That fairly inconsequential and cute scene from earlier with Walt and Holly ended up acting as very clever foreshadowing that most viewers might have missed, and it had dire consequences. Walt's conversation with Jane's father, along with his decision to let her die, are connected to this final example of foreshadowing, and his inaction ended up being a perfect example of the butterfly effect. Throughout the season, beginning with the premiere, several episodes begin with a sequence in black and white. As the season progresses, we see more and more of this event in order for the audience to attempt to put the pieces together. At first, we see what appears to be a human eye floating in a pool being sucked into the filter. We see a pink teddy bear submerged in the same pool, and as it turns out, it is missing an eye and charred on one of its sides. We hear a police siren fading in from the distance. We see several body bags and people in hazard suits collecting evidence and placing them in plastic bags and containers. Based on the plot of the show, it is rightfully assumed to be a meth lab explosion that occurred inside Walt's house. Rightfully, but we really should have known better. Season 1 was already extraordinarily original and special for a television show, but Season 2 proved that Breaking Bad was going to be groundbreaking. For the black and white sequence shown at the beginning of the season finale, all of the previous shots are put together in order. At the very end, the camera switches to a view from the front of Walt's house and a van with the initials NTSB is shown driving away. As the camera pans up, the scene fades into color and we see it's not an event localized to Walt's backyard. There is smoke billowing from the ground from several other locations, along with a half a dozen helicopters swarming the airspace. This was not a meth lab explosion after all, and soon the season-long mystery and use of foreshadowing will be resolved. As Jane's father drives to her apartment to pick her up for rehab, he sees an ambulance outside. By the look on his face, he already knows she is dead. After seeing it firsthand and confirming his worst nightmare, he spends the rest of the episode in an almost emotionless and cathartic state. He decides to return to work, but it soon becomes clear it was too early and he wasn't ready. After 12 2/3 of episodes, we find out that he is an air traffic controller. Obviously distracted by his daughter's recent death, he loses his concentration and we see two planes approaching one another at a dangerous rate on his display. As Walt is reeling from Skylar's discovery of his many lies, he retreats to his backyard. He is suddenly startled by an explosion in the sky, and it becomes perfectly clear that two planes have collided. We next switch to a POV of something falling from the collision, and it lands in Walt's pool with a splash, which was a nice callback to the splash when Hank threw Tuco's and Kate's grill into the river. Walt approaches the side of the pool, and we see the pink teddy bear. Foreshadowing, which started with the very first scene of the very first episode of the season, has been resolved with the very last shot of the season finale. As an added little bonus, the titles of these 4 episodes, when put together, form the sentence 747 down over ABQ. Before I end this analysis, I want to quickly point out 2 scenes, which again seemed insignificant at the time, which also foreshadowed this event. During episode 9, while Walt and Jesse are stuck in the desert, we see 2 shots of planes and their trails in the air. Finally, during episode 12, Hank and Walt discuss installing an alarm for the pool in case anything falls into it. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this analysis, please drop a like or subscribe. Thanks again.